Hey everyone, before we get into today's pod, I want to tell you about Blue Wire Hustle, a brand new program where you can host your very own podcast here at Blue Wire. Hustle was created to give everyone an opportunity to take your podcast to the next level. Or if you want to host a podcast and just don't know where to start, Hustle is the perfect place for you. As part of the program, you'll receive personal cover art, Q&As with Blue Wire's top podcasters, access to our community Discord, and an e-learning course full of tips and tricks. On top of that, we'll help you get your show pushed out to Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, and all other listening platforms. The best part is you can get all of this for only $15 a month, the same rate that any other hosting site would charge you just for the initial setup alone. So whether you're starting from scratch or have an existing show that you want to grow, Hustle is an open door to leveling your sports experience. Acceptance into the program is limited, so get your application in today. To apply, go to bwhustle.com/join. Check out that description box to find out more, but that's bwhustle.com/join. Welcome, Irish fans, to another edition of the Opponents Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Vince DeDario, and I am the football analyst here at irishbreakdown.com. So here we are. It is College Football Playoff Semifinal week. Notre Dame is 10-1 and looking for their first College Football Playoff victory in program history. And we have a ton to talk about when it comes to this game, and you can find it all over on irishbreakdown.com, as well as our podcast, wherever you get your podcast. So make sure you subscribe, and you can rate and review, and also make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can get notified whenever we have a new episode drop. But today we are going to talk about the opponent for Notre Dame in the semifinal game, the number one ranked Alabama Crimson Tide. It is a 4:00 kickoff in Dallas for the Rose Bowl. Weird, yes, but it's 2020, so why not? So a Rose Bowl date with Alabama in Dallas, 4:00 on ABC. Make sure you log into irishbreakdown.com prior to, during, and after the game for all of the updates and analysis. And before we get started into our deep dive into Alabama, we must hear from one of our sponsors, and that first sponsor is Indeed.
2020 has already reshaped how we work, and it's almost over. Businesses across the globe are challenged to be their most efficient, which means every hire is critical, and Indeed is here to help.
Indeed is the number one job site in the world with more total visits than any other job site, and that's according to ComScore. Indeed helps you find quality candidates quickly so you can focus on hiring the person you need to keep your business going.
And unlike other sites, Indeed gives you full control and payment flexibility over your hiring. You only pay for what you need. You can pause your account at any time, and there are no long-term contracts.
And now, Indeed's new way of matching you with candidates instantly delivers a short list of quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your job criteria. You can contact them the moment you sponsor a job, making Indeed the only job site that can move as fast as you do.
And according to ComScore, 73% of online job seekers in the U.S. are visiting Indeed each month. So it's clear Indeed can help you get the quality hire you need. That's why more than 3 million businesses worldwide use Indeed for hiring.
Right now, Indeed is offering our listeners a free $75 credit to boost your job post, which means more quality candidates will see it fast. Try Indeed out with a free $75 credit at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. This is their best offer available anywhere. Go right now to Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Offer valid through December 31st. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, welcome back, Irish fans. With me today to talk about the Crimson Tide of Alabama is Tyler Martin. He is a staff writer for Bama Central. Tyler, how you doing today, sir?
What's up, Vince? Glad to be back on here, and glad to be bringing in the new year in the Rose Bowl, talking about a classic matchup between Alabama and Notre Dame.
No doubt, no doubt. It doesn't get much more blue blood than Alabama and Notre Dame, regardless of the last time these two teams met. It's still a blue blood matchup, and hopefully it's going to be a good matchup. But we'll We'll all find that out together on January 1st. The first thing I wanted to talk to you about, and I set up all my guests this way. I want to get an idea about the state of the program with Alabama. Obviously, the Crimson Tide is no stranger to the college football playoff. What's the word out of Alabama camp so far this week leading into this game?
Yeah, so I guess really the biggest storyline you want to look at and what fans can kind of point to as, they don't really know what the impact's going to be, and that's losing Landon Dickerson, right?
Right.
Alabama center was a Remington Trophy finalist, for the top center in the country, and he goes down late in that Florida game. Some people want to call it dirty play or whatever. He went down, he had some ligament damage in his knee. He had successful surgery, and it looks like they're going to move Chris Owens, a redshirt senior, who's kind of been that sixth offensive lineman. They're going to move him into the center spot. And it's really tough for him to kind of come in there and pick up where Landon left off, because with center, you've got to make sure that your guys on the line know where they're going. You've got to do a good job of anchoring that. So that might be the biggest maybe storyline coming out of this week, and how he's going to fit in this offensive line. Because Notre Dame too, right? Notre Dame's Joe Moore Award finalist. So is Alabama, and then Texas A&M. And I just think that's maybe the biggest storyline that people need to be paying attention to this week. And then it's the same old, right? Mac Jones, Devontae Smith, Najee Harris, this three-headed monster. What can they do on Friday? How can they pick up where they left off against Florida, right? Najee had 5 touchdowns. Mac threw for the most ever yards in an SEC title game. And Devontae Smith caught the most passes in an SEC title game. So it's just about, stacking up these performances and, hopefully, potentially, one of them getting the Heisman Trophy. And but I think it all starts up front with the offensive line this week. And then, too, the defense. How does the defense rebound off of, they had a good stretch of 7 games where they were, only allowing, in the 7 games, they only allowed 77 points after the Ole Miss debacle. And then they give up 46 in one game to Florida. So really it's about how can the defense rebound. And Notre Dame's a team, that's going to be able to test them, right? They can test them on the ground. They can test them vertically as well, because they've got some big tight ends as well. So that's what I'm kind of looking forward this week coming up on Friday.
Well, you nailed it. Let's start with one of the points that you brought up with Dickerson being out, the center position being so important to the offensive line. You don't have to tell Irish fans about that. They're still trying to figure out the center position since Jarrett Patterson went out for the year, and just how important it is with the line calls and just being kind of the captain by default of that offensive line. It's kind of like the quarterback. You're automatically the captain of the offense. The center is pretty much automatically the captain of that offensive line. So losing Dickerson is a big deal. But this offensive line is no slouch. I mean, you said it. They're a Joe Moore Award finalist, along with Notre Dame and Texas A&M. But they can push you around. They're big. They are a very large offensive line. Mac Jones hardly ever gets touched, frankly, in the pass game, and they can maul you in the run game. So just give us an idea about what you've seen from this offensive line all season.
Yeah, they've been the most impressive unit all season, in my opinion, given, maybe the SEC front sevens they've gone up against. And then, too, you're right. You've got the bookend tackles. You've got Alex Leatherwood over there at left tackle. He's 6'6", 300 plus pounds. Then Evan Neal, who's a sophomore, who's another guy who's 6'6". He's a little heavier, around 315, 320-ish. And, he's been unbelievable. He moved from guard over to right tackle after Jedrick Wills left this past year. And then the inside, the interior, you've got a guy, Emil Ekiyor, who a lot of people thought might have been the weakest link. He's actually turned out to be, really strong performances over the course of 2020. And then another senior, Deontay Brown. And so already coming into this year, we knew this was going to be a strong group, led by 3 seniors, Leatherwood, Deontay Brown, and then Landon Dickerson. But they've exceeded expectations, right? I think Mac Jones has only been sacked 21 times, and they've given him all day to throw the football, allowing Devontae Smith to get open as well for some of the catches he's made. But it really starts up front with those guys, and even in the Arkansas game, Evan Neal was out because of COVID-19 protocols, and they put Chris Owens, so I mentioned earlier, who's going to fill in center on Friday. They put him in at right tackle. He played really well in that game, and so he's got experience as a redshirt senior. But you just kind of miss the continuity, right? Because Nick Saban talks about it a lot. The award that he likes the most, and he said this, is the Joe Moore Award, because it's more of a team and a unit getting the job done rather than just an individual player. And when one of those guys are gone, you're going to kind of take some, it's going to take some, shake some rust off and figure out the continuity, because I wouldn't be surprised on Friday, Alabama comes out, maybe we see a 3-and-out on their first 2 drives, just because, trying to shake off, 12 days being off. And they were off earlier this year, because they missed They had the LSU game postponed, so they missed 2 weeks. They had 2 bye weeks, but we'll see. I think Alabama, their bread and butter is the offensive line, and potentially, that's why Najee Harris this year too became Alabama's all-time rusher behind those guys, and he even said it after the SEC title game. He's like, those guys should be on there instead of my name.
Well, and watching film of Alabama, I mean, watching that offensive line, there's times where Harris gets the ball, and he's a very patient runner, and we'll talk about him in just a second. There's times where he's 4 yards down the field. He's still behind the offensive line, hasn't been touched. I mean,
Yeah.
it makes your job a little bit easier when you're a running back and you've got that kind of room to run. But so let's go there. Najee Harris, he probably was off some national radar maybe the last year or two, but now he's one of the three-headed monster, like you said. I mean, this is the first time in who knows how long. You may have that date off the top of your head that three guys from the same team are in the top 5 of the Heisman Trophy balloting. I think it was in the 60s, if I want to say right, but I'm not 100% on that. But either way, the three-headed monster for Alabama is unbelievable. And let's start with the running back, Najee Harris, and what he brings to the table.
Yeah, I think like the offensive line, if you look at it without Najee this year, right? I don't know if Alabama has the success they have. I don't know if they get back to the college football playoff after missing last year without Najee. He's only carried the ball 214 times this year, and he's got almost 1,300 yards. And then he's averaging almost 6 yards a carry. It's just really unbelievable what he has done. And then in the passing game too, right? 3 of his 5 touchdowns against Florida were through the air.
Right.
He's got over 300 receiving yards. He actually owns Alabama's record for all-time career touchdowns at 45 now. And then too, he's caught, he has 5 receiving touchdowns on the year. He's got over 23 rushing touchdowns. And to kind of put in perspective what he's having, you look at the last 2 Heisman winners from Alabama, Mark Ingram, Derrick Henry. You know who's having a better season than? Maybe not in terms of the rushing yards, but just in terms of all-around backs. It's Najee Harris. He's having a better year than Derrick Henry had in 2015. He's having a better year than Mark Ingram had in 2009. And it's just kind of, interesting to see how that even having a better year than those 2 guys is only going to get him 5th in the Heisman race.
Right.
But he's the leader on this team too. He was named to the SEC Community Service Team. He's a guy who, right when they didn't even know if they were going to play this year, he helped start the players movement, hashtag we want to play. He was a big vocal leader on that front. And he's just been a guy who is just, hey, he's going to bring his lunch pail. He's going to put his head down. He's going to go to work. And you see that on the field. And what I've been so impressed with him is just his cuts, right? I mean, his first step is quick. He's really agile. And this year, he's seen his game soar, and even his draft stock soar to another level. Because you think about it, if he would have left after his junior year last year, and the second half of the season without Tua in there, he was unbelievable.
Right.
He probably wouldn't have even gone, maybe even in the second round, because I think Swift was who was the second back taken, was a mid-second round pick. But Najee Harris has played himself into the first round, and that's exactly what he wanted to do when he decided to come back.
It's pretty cool when players bet on themselves and it pays off. And Alabama is the recipient of that bet. There is no doubt about that. Mac Jones. Did you guys see this coming from Mac Jones? I mean, he's not a top 5 pick in the NFL or anything like that. But as my partner Brian Driscoll will say, he's the perfect trigger man for this offense. After filling the shoes of Tua and Hurts and any of the guys in the last 3 or 4 guys for Alabama, did you see this coming from Mac Jones?
So it's interesting because when they canceled spring practice, right, because of COVID-19, you had Bryce Young, the 5-star, the number 1 player in the country, SI All-American, coming in there, and you just didn't know how Mac Jones was going to handle it.
Sure.
You saw in his 4 starts last year, right, against Michigan. Let's see, it was Arkansas, Michigan, Arkansas, Western Carolina, and Auburn, right? Arkansas at the time, they were a dead team. They were awful. Western Carolina, their FCS level team, right? So the only really 2 starts you could judge him off of was Michigan and Auburn. And in the Auburn game, he was unbelievable, right? Threw for over 400 yards. But the issue was the 2 pick sixes that ultimately cost Alabama the game. And then in the bowl game, in the Citrus Bowl against Michigan, he comes out, he delivers, he's very efficient. And that was before COVID, right? So nobody knew what was going to happen. They had Bryce Young going in there, and everybody, you could hear the murmurs from the fan base, right? Oh, Bryce Young might step in here and do this, because Mac's going to have a lot of pressure already filling Tua's shoes. Now you've got another 5-star prodigy coming up. And then once you lose spring practice, right, you got to go with who has the most experience going
Sure.
into fall camp, and that's Mac Jones. And for me personally, this was a guy I was on radio shows here in the state of Alabama, and I was hyping this guy up because Mac Jones, he might not be the most athletic guy. He might not have the biggest arm, but one thing I know about Mac Jones is that he's a competitor and he's a leader. He's just a natural born leader. He wants to win at all costs, and he proved that, right? His first two of the first five, or three of the first five games, excuse me, he throws for 400 yards, and he becomes now Alabama's all-time leader in 400-yard passing games. Who would have thought that'd be Mac Jones, right?
Right.
He's efficient, and he doesn't turn the football over. That's the biggest thing, right? Like Ian, I was looking at Ian Book's stats this year, right? Notre Dame has gotten better, in my opinion, because Ian Book doesn't turn the football over. Mac Jones doesn't really turn the football over. 27 touchdowns to 4 picks. He doesn't make mistakes. He's very cerebral, above the neck, and he's very patient now at times. And I think losing that Iron Bowl last year taught him so much, and he was able to bounce back from that and have a strong season. And because the majority of the fan base didn't see this coming, people outside the program didn't see this coming because you look at Mac Jones, he's 6'3". He doesn't look athletic, doesn't have a really rock solid build. You're just kind of like, who is this guy? And he also, has the most 80-yard pass plays too in Alabama history. He's got like 4 or 5 of those. And his connection with Waddle before he got hurt, and then DeVonta Smith has been incredible, just down the field. And he leads the nation in the stats that really matter to me for quarterback, right? Passer rating, completion percentage, yards per attempt. And he's just been the most efficient quarterback in America, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, efficient is a really, really good word. And in the college system, being efficient can get you a heck of a long way. But he makes those mouth dropping plays too. And he's got some weapons to throw to. And you mentioned Jalen Waddle. Obviously, he got hurt after I think the 5th game of this, or in the 5th game of the season. But DeVonta Smith, who arguably the best player in college football, depending on who you talk to, but he does a great job of getting the ball spread around to who he needs to get it to so that those guys can make plays. And obviously Notre Dame's going to get a front row seat to what DeVonta Smith can do. Talk about, what he brings to the table, because he is one of the most proficient route runners I've ever seen at this level. I mean, he just, even when he's covered, he gets open. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, in the play that I think kind of characterizes DeVonta Smith, when it was at LSU, and it was 3rd and long. I think they were about the 15-yard line, and Mac Jones just kind of threw it up there to DeVonta Smith. And where I was sitting in the press box, I was like, "Oh, that ball's going out of bounds. There's no way Smitty gets to that." And he just reaches up, palms it one hand over Derek Stingley, who's arguably the best cornerback in America. And then that right there was kind of like, wow, this is DeVonta Smith's Heisman moment, when we kind of realized what kind of, what kind of player he was. And we realized, man, even with Waddle's been out, the defenses have looked at the Alabama offense, and they said, all right, we need to shut down DeVonta Smith, and they might double him, they might triple coverage him. But guess what? DeVonta Smith is still getting open. He's still dominating. He's got 3 200-yard games. He's got 4 100-yard games. Yeah, he's got 17 receiving touchdowns. I think 1 or 2 rushing touchdowns as well. He's just, he has been another guy who Nick Saban has talked about as who has done, nobody has done more for their programs than DeVonta Smith has done for Alabama, because he just puts his head down and just works. He doesn't care about the accolades. He doesn't care about the Heisman talk. He even told us, he's like, it's frustrating to talk about this because I'm just worried about the next game. I'm worried about the next challenge. And it's just impressive. And he's a guy who, he led Alabama in receiving in 2019. And people forget, Jerry Jeudy was on that team. Henry Rose was on 2 first-round picks, and Waddle as a sophomore. And everybody wants to remember Smitty for the guy who caught second in 26, which is a great place to be. But he's potentially about to bookend his career with the Heisman Trophy. And that's a pretty awesome way to go out if you're DeVonta Smith. I just think when you think about the Alabama receivers who've gone through Julio Jones, Amari Cooper, Calvin Ridley, Jerry Jeudy, Ruggs, I just mentioned DeVonta Smith is number 1. That's because of the production. That's because he holds all the records now. And it's just because, he doesn't really drop a lot of passes either, right? He's got really reliable hands. His catch radius is out of this world. To even be kind of undersized a little bit, he's got really good speed, maybe not as fast as Waddle, but he's the most clutch. And he's the guy who can, he's the most reliable receiver in Alabama history.
Yeah, he's unbelievable. And Jalen Waddle was obviously one of the go-to guys before he went down. I would argue that the offense is probably more balanced now that Jalen Waddle isn't around, which is crazy to say because he's such an amazing talent. Is that kind of what you've seen as well? They just had to kind of refocus what they were doing offensively.
Yeah, I think if you go look at Najee's number, right, when Waddle was in the game, I believe the A&M game, which was the second game of the year, Najee has like 50 rushing yards. Yeah, he had a couple touchdowns, but I mean 50 rushing yards. And then in Georgia, Ole Miss, Najee had a really good game. And then in Georgia, he also had a good game. Ole Miss was the third game I was speaking about. And then Waddle gets hurt on the opening kickoff against Tennessee. I think their offense would have looked something similar to this, even with Waddle in there.
Okay.
Obviously, Devontae Smith's numbers would go well. I'll say this: Devontae Smith's numbers could be similar. I think John Mechie and maybe where Jaleel Billingsley, Alabama's tight end, and maybe Slade Bolden, their production may have gone down if Waddle would have been in there. But I think Devontae Smith would have put up comparable numbers with Waddle still in there. But you look at this, man. They played Georgia. That was the biggest game of the college football season up to that point, 1 versus 4.
Right.
And the game turned on its head when Jalen Waddle caught a 99-yard touchdown pass. And that's just the kind of, electricity he brings. And when he got hurt, there was a lot of pundits out there saying, oh, Alabama's done. Alabama's done. Well, that obviously it wasn't the case. And I think there was also too, rumors that I had heard and other people had heard about, oh, there's a chance for him to come back in the playoff. He got his cast off a little early. He just got his boot off. Devontae Smith posted a video of him in the locker room talking about he's back. And then Nick Saban shut that down yesterday. So I wouldn't expect Jalen Waddle back against Notre Dame or even against Clemson or Ohio State if Alabama gets past Notre Dame. But Jalen Waddle certainly has made his millions at Alabama, and he's going to do that in the NFL.
Yeah, no doubt about it. You stole my next question because I was going to see what the talk was around the Alabama camp about Waddle coming back, but it doesn't sound good. So at least Notre Dame has that going for them, which I don't know if that's enough, but at least they've got that going for them. Before we jump into the defense, I want to take a quick break here, and we're going to hear from one of our presenting sponsors, and that is Bet Online. The NBA is back in action, and football is heading into the playoffs. You might not be at a game this year, but you can still be in on the action at Bet Online. Bet Online is going the extra mile to make sure you can get in on every possible chance to win this season. From game spreads and totals to team, player, and coaching props, Bet Online gives you more options to wager than anywhere else. You can get in on their season opening bonuses today and start off wagering on wins, division, and championship futures all day, every day. Head to Bet Online today and take advantage of all the great sign-up bonuses. Don't forget to use the promo code BLUEWIRE at betonline.ag. That's Blue Wire, all one word. Bet Online, your online sportsbook experts. Okay, welcome back, Irish fans. And we are here today with Tyler Martin. He is a staff writer at Bama Central, and we are talking all things Alabama. Let's talk about this Alabama defense. And first, I want to get an overview from you. You've been covering the team for a little while. You know what this Alabama defense was, let's say even 8 years ago, 10 years ago, 7 years ago. The strength of the team was the defense. And now, Nick Saban smartly, as a very, very good coach, said, look, we need an offense that can put points on the board. I don't want to say the defense has taken a back seat, but the offense has kind of taken that lead role as the strength of this team. So the defensive numbers aren't what they used to be, but this is still a pretty darn good defense. What are your thoughts on the defense as a whole?
Yeah, I think it all starts with Patrick Surtain the second on the edge. I think he's been the best corner all of college football. He's locked down. And think about him. He had so much hype when he got to Alabama, right? His father played in the NFL for a long time, and he's lived up to that. And he's going to be a first-round pick. It really starts with him. I think he's a very quiet guy in terms of leadership on the field, very vocal. He talks with his play, and he's been unbelievable for Alabama. And then too, it's also two freshmen. It's Malachi Moore, who has been before the Florida game when Kadarius Toney beat him on a double move. That was the first touchdown he had given up all season. Before that, he was going to probably win SEC Freshman of the Year. He's been that good, and he wasn't even going to start a week before the Missouri game. People I had talked to in fall camp, it was Brian Branch who kind of had that star spot in their dime package and everything. And And Malachi just kind of came in, and his IQ is so high as a freshman. And because they didn't have COVID, he was able to, or because they had COVID and they were able to, focus more on Zooms, focus more on the intel, and everything was slowed down. Malachi understood it. And you can just see it on the field for a freshman. He is so smart. He leads the team in interceptions as well. And then another freshman, edge rusher Will Anderson, who is going to be an absolute unit when it's all said and done. He leads the SEC in sacks as a freshman. And Vince, his first sack came against Auburn in game number 8. And he leads the SEC in sacks with 12. He's a monster coming off the edge. And I just kind of felt earlier in the year, he was a millisecond off. He was a couple seconds off from really busting that play in the backfield. You saw it against Missouri. You saw it against A&M. You saw it against Ole Miss. And it kind of starts with 2 freshmen and then Patrick Surtain. And then we're talking about Dylan Moses. Now, Dylan Moses, he's got the accolades this season. He was second team All-American by the AP. He was first team All-SEC. And, he kind of had a sluggish start. He's coming off of an ACL tear, and he was his Alabama leader on defense. I was expecting more of a season from him where it's more like Jeremiah Asu from Notre Dame, where he's going to have 100 some odd tackles and he's going to be potentially a Buckus Award winner. That didn't happen. And it felt like he was trying to do too much on the field because he had missed all of last year. And, he's a guy who's still been a leader. He's a captain. He's a really good player. There's no doubt about that. He might have struggled a little bit this season. And then you've got younger players, sophomore Jordan Battle, who's a safety on the back end. And then you've got Christian Harris, another linebacker who's been playing exceptionally well for Alabama this season. So I think it really starts with those guys I named, and they've had their moments, right? I mean, they realized, Pete Golding said it yesterday, the Ole Miss game was a come to Jesus moment. The Florida game was rough. But this defense, when they're not playing first round picks, I guess you could say with Ole Miss with Elijah Moore and Kenny Yeboah, and then Florida with Trask, Pitts, and Tony, they're going to be able to shut you down.
The front seven has always been kind of the calling card for Alabama. How do you see the front seven playing against, this Notre Dame team who does have a pretty darn good offensive line and a pretty good run game? How do you see them matching up with Notre Dame?
Yeah, it's best on best, and we love these kind of games. And I mentioned Will Anderson and his sack totals. As a team, Alabama, I believe, has 33 sacks on the year, and 22 of those have come in the last 4 games. So they've kind of turned it up a notch. And a guy in the middle who I think's you mentioned Notre Dame center. They're going to have some questions there. A guy in the middle whoever that is going to be in that position going up against is Christian Barmore. Christian Barmore is a guy who's got a lot of sacks this year. He's developed into some first-round hype. And, if he plays really well, he kind of brings the intensity. He brings the energy for that defensive line. He's a guy I would watch. And, if he's disrupting and he's in the backfield, it will be a long day for Notre Dame. But you kind of look off the edge, too. Chris Allen is a guy who leads the SEC in tackles for loss with 12. You got him. LeBron Ray has been out pretty much. He's only played three or four games this season. He's been dealing with an elbow sprain. He was another guy who had a lot of NFL hype coming into the year. Christian Barmore, Christopher Allen. You've got DJ Dale up in the middle, too, clogging up the running lanes. And Tim Smith, too, another freshman defensive tackle who's been really, really solid in the moments he's played. But this Alabama defense is just kind of young in some areas. And on the defensive line, they're still young. Christian Barmore's a sophomore. Yeah. He's a redshirt sophomore, though. But I think in terms of a matchup with Notre Dame's offensive line, it's going to be the best offensive line they have faced, because they faced Texas A&M week 2. And I went back and looked at the numbers. They didn't get any sacks. They really didn't get mauled under any pressure at all. And so I think when they're facing a caliber of like Notre Dame, because I think Alabama and Notre Dame is the 2 best offensive lines in the country because they're the 2 most experienced, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
That they're, they've got to figure out different ways to dial up blitzes to get to Ian Book. Because if you let Ian Book, have all day, he's going to find those big tight ends in the middle of the field where I think Alabama is most vulnerable. Or even, if they're not careful, they get out to the outside. Ian Book can beat you with his feet as well. So the defensive line and kind of coming up with some creative ways to get to him is what I'm going to be looking for.
No, absolutely. I wanted to ask you one more question about Surtain and just the manner in which they use him. Is he the kind of guy, or should I say the scheme, is it the kind of scheme where they're going to attach him to the other team's number 1 receiver and just follow him wherever? Or is he going to be, playing the field or playing the boundary or just whoever happens to line up in front of him, that's who he's going to take?
Yeah, it's really not so much of, hey, I'm going to lock down your number 1 guy. It's more so the boundary, and it's more so, whoever is just lined up in front of him, right? Because they have a lot of trust in Josh Jobe as well, the opposite corner. He's had his struggles in the past, but they have a lot of trust in him. And so whoever lines up against Surtain, what they're going to have to realize is he's very physical with his hands, right? I think Pro Football Focus rated him the best press corner in the country. So he's going to be up in their face, right at the line of scrimmage, hitting them with his hands. But he's a guy that, that his whole thing is, hey, you're just going to cover the side of the field and you're going to lock it down. He calls it an iceberg, not really an island, but that's how he goes about his business. And he's, like I said, he's played himself into, top 10 draft consideration, right? And he's been unbelievable. But they do have a lot of trust in Josh Jobe, and I'll be curious to see what happens with those two corners in the game, and then two on the back end, because I feel like even though Surtain is there on the corner, they're most vulnerable in the middle of the field and the back end at the safety position with guys like Daniel Wright and Jordan Battle.
Let's see if Notre Dame could take advantage of that, because I agree with you. I think that's the weak spot, right? We're splitting hairs when we find weak spots when we're talking about a team like Alabama, but that should be a lot of fun to watch. I wanted to ask you about special teams real fast, because for Irish fans who have not watched a single Alabama game, especially when Jalen Waddle was in, that's the biggest spot where Jalen Waddle affected the game. I mean, he is one heck of a return guy in kickoffs and punt returns. Without him back there, what's the answer for Alabama?
So it's kind of been like a revolving door, essentially, since Waddle went down. It was Slade Bolden, who's kind of like their wildcat guy, if you want to say, maybe the Julian Edelman type on the team. And then, he had an ankle sprain against Kentucky, and, we really haven't seen too much of him. He's had a couple passes here and there, or catches here and there. And then they put DeVonta Smith back there. And then we saw against Arkansas, him getting that punt return for a touchdown that really changed the game and really opened the door for Alabama to blow out Arkansas. And then now, what I thought was so interesting, we just had a story up this morning. This is Tuesday morning on BamaCentral.com of Jaleel Billingsley, a tight end who has been fielding kickoffs. He fielded 3 against Florida, and he had a long of the 27 yards. And so Alabama's got some dynamic playmakers they can put back there. Maybe the only one who could match Waddle's electricity is DeVonta Smith. But they're going to try to figure out ways to use other guys, because Nick Saban wants to. He's got such a loaded roster, right? And he wants to make sure he fits those guys into the right spots. And when I mentioned Jaleel Billingsley, he's been kind of a nice wrinkle to this offense as a big tight end. He's kind of this Darren Waller type. I would say that's who he's kind of similar to. But he's come along of late, and he's made some big third down catches against Florida. But in the special teams department, look out for Jaleel, and then look out obviously for DeVonta Smith.
You can always look out for DeVonta Smith.
Yeah.
Just find out where he's at, and that's where you need to focus. So I want to get some keys to victory, to having a good game for Alabama against Notre Dame on January 1st.
Yeah, so I think it starts with I'm actually going to start with the defense side of the ball. If they can get to Ian Book, if they can just put him on his back 3 or 4 times, I think Alabama is going to have a lot of success on that side of the ball, because I went back and watched some of Notre Dame Clemson round 2, and I was so impressed with how Notre Dame played in that first game when they beat them in South Bend, and then it comes back here in Charlotte, and they kind of let the Clemson front 7 kind of have a field day, right? 8 sacks, and if Alabama can just take a page out of that playbook and just force Ian Book, to make some dangerous throws on first and second down and put them in third and long. I like where Alabama stands in this game. But where Alabama's kind of been most vulnerable is on third downs, right, this year. And they've kind of given up some big plays. I mean, you go look at the Florida game, there was a 3rd and 17 that there was a stupid holding call that gave Florida a first down, right? And so there's been moments like that this season where it's just kind of been head scratching for Alabama. And Notre Dame, you look at the numbers, they're arguably one of the best teams on third down in terms of success rate. So if Notre Dame can get in third and manageable, that's not good for Alabama. They want them in third and long, obviously. They want negative plays on first and second down, and they want to get to Ian Book. On offense, you just got to keep on keeping on, right? You just got to keep riding the back of your offensive line, even with Dickerson out. I think Chris Owens is formidable. I think he's going to have a solid game. And I think, you ride behind Najee and DeVonta Smith, right? Steve Sarkisian has been so creative. He's been so he's really showed off his offensive mastermind this season. You go look at this. It was 4th and 1. You go back and look at this in the Florida game. 4th and 1. He runs a tight end sneak. And it's just he's been so dynamic, and he's been so elusive in his play calling. And this is why Alabama is potentially going to give him a raise and going to keep him for a long time. And offense. I mean, nobody's been able to really stop them this year. They've been perfect. So for them, it's just keep on keeping on, and Mac Jones not turning the football over because this Notre Dame defense, they play really good team defense. They tackle really well. And if somehow Mac does end up throwing a pick, which he hasn't done, since the Florida game, which that pick might not have been his fault, he can't get his head down. He's got to keep moving on because this is the biggest stage he's been on yet in his time at Alabama. And I just think for them, it's hey, Devontae Smith, get him the ball wherever he's on the field. He's probably going to beat the guy matched up to him. I mean, and that's nobody can really cover him this season. But it's just, hey, riding the offensive line and picking up those chunk plays.
That's good stuff, Tyler. I appreciate it, man. I want to thank you for joining me on the Opponents Insider podcast today. Would you please let everyone know your Twitter handle and where they can follow your work?
Yeah, you guys can find me on Twitter at Steven Tyler _15, like the Aerosmith singer, Steven the V, and then Bama Central, BamaCentral.com. We're the Sports Illustrated home for all Crimson Tide athletics. Football, basketball, baseball, gymnastics, any Alabama sport you want to talk about.
Nice.
We're on there covering it. And Vince, I really appreciate you having me on here, man. And look forward to this game in Dallas.
Oh, no question. It should be a lot of fun. Again, that's Tyler Martin, who's the staff writer for Bama Central. This could be the final Opponents Insider podcast for the season, but either way, it is the final episode of 2020. So we will see how things play out again on New Year's Day. Either way, I want to wish everyone a happy new year, and I want to thank you for joining me on the Opponents Insider podcast all season. We are truly thankful for all of our listeners and readers. For Tyler Martin, I am Vince DeDario, and we look forward to talking to you next time.